She was a beautiful woman. She had polio when she was young. She had a leg shorter than the other one. And I know she told me once that she fell in love with a man, and because of her handicap, she didn't have the chance to get married.
Yvette Belair never married. As she got older, she grew bitter.
Now this is my Aunt Yvette there.
Nicole Lajeunesse remembers being one of the few who could stand her. After all, she admits, her aunt was a miserable miser.
She loves so much money. Everything has to go to the bank, and she was not spending not even a cent for herself. I never saw her with a beautiful dress. Never, 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 never.
Yvette Belair never worked, but over the years built up a small fortune through inheritance and shrewd investments. She owned 2 properties, a 6-plex and a duplex. Yet this is how she lived, surrounded by filth, junk, and the stench of her pet's excrement.
When I go with my mother, she would say, "You want a piece of lemon pie?" I will never touch it. You couldn't tell that she had so much money, but it was not our business.
In 1984, Yvette Belair's life changed. She was 75 and in very poor health. Her home was so dirty, so decrepit, the city condemned it, and she wound up here at Jean Talon Hospital. A psychiatrist examined her and declared her incompetent, allowing the hospital to put her under the care of the public curator. The public curator is the government body that takes care of people when they can't take care of themselves, and there's no one else willing to step in. It took charge of Yvette Belair's assets, worth some $200,000, and moved her into this nursing home. To pay for her care, the public curator sold her properties. And at an auction like this one, sold off her antiques, her silver, and all her other possessions, standard procedure. Belair spent the next 6 years in the nursing home. Her niece visited her only a couple of times a year, but says she phoned every 3 weeks or so. She made her last call in January of 1992.
I phoned our private phone. I always, phoned it. And they said there was no more service. I was surprised. I phoned at the reception, and they said, "Oh, who are you?" I said, "I'm her niece." They said, "No, she has no niece." I said, "How can you say that? You've got all my phone numbers, my name, you got all this." Of course I'm her niece. So they got all excited. They said, "Oh, she passed away."
Yvette Belair had died of pneumonia at Jean Talon Hospital a couple of weeks earlier. While her family wasn't close, she did leave behind 2 elderly sisters and 8 nieces and nephews. No one called them. So Yvette Belair was brought here, to the University of Montreal. Like this person, an unclaimed body, sent to the university's medical school to be used as an anatomy class cadaver. Nicole Lajeunesse says her aunt was a devout Catholic and would never have consented to donating her body to medical science, nor would she have wanted to end up here, in a barren backwoods cemetery, in a common grave.
Vous savez pas du tout où elle est enterrée?
C'est atténuement en 92, là, elle serait ici.
Quand on a une fosse commune, tout le monde est dedans.
Ouais, c'est ça.
Son corps à elle, là, vous ne pouvez même pas le localiser pour que je transfère rien. On ne peut pas faire ça.
Non.
When Yvette Belair died, not only did she have relatives, she also left about $100,000, certainly enough to give her a proper burial. So why on earth was she treated this way? To find out, we had to perform a bureaucratic autopsy, examining file after file, and eventually uncovering a series of mistakes, a tragedy of errors. At the center of it all, the public curator, the very people whose job it was to protect her. Yvon Desjardins is one of the directors. He agreed to an interview, but refused to discuss the Belair case, saying it's confidential.
Non, moi, je ne peux pas.
We showed him a legal authorization from the niece, giving him permission to publicly discuss the case. Still, he would answer only general questions, such as what the public curator does when someone under its care dies.
Alors, dans chaque cas, vous vérifiez dans le dossier pour voir s'il y a de la famille, il y a de la parenté.
Exact.
Vous êtes sûr?
Oui.
But when Yvette Belair died, they didn't contact her relatives. The public curator told the hospital it couldn't find any. Yet in its very own file on Belair, at the top of the psychiatric report declaring her incompetent, is the name and phone number of her niece, Nicole Lajeunesse. In the same file, record of an inheritance from Yvette Belair's sister Reine, who had also been under the care of the public curator. Had they cross-referenced Reine's file, they would have found the names and addresses of the other inheritors, Yvette Belair's 2 surviving sisters and her 8 nieces and nephews. Still, the public curator told Jean Talon Hospital Yvette Belair had no next of kin. The hospital says its archivist went through Belair's foot-high medical file thoroughly and even checked one of her sister's files. Dr. Alain Brissette.
Confirmed that they have tried to reach any known member of the family in the medical file.
But the psychiatric report with the niece's name and phone number up top was in this file too.
Is it possible they made a mistake and just didn't see her name there?
It's possible, but I cannot confirm that.
Next, the police did a search for relatives at the hospital's request.
But I can assure you that in this file that everything was done to find relatives.
But Lieutenant Detective Michel Rochon says police were working on the assumption relatives probably couldn't be reached because the public curator, the hospital, and the nursing home all couldn't find any. So police did the routine checks. Anything more, he says, would have required access to confidential government files, which means going before a judge.
It would mean an enormous amount of resources they'd have to put on the case. And, you know, it's just not feasible. It's just not feasible to...
The police report concluded, family not located, despite search. The hospital could now legally give the body to the university. Even so, the public curator was required by law to make sure Yvette Belair's religious beliefs were respected.
Il y a une indication dans le dossier que la personne qui est décédée avait certaines intentions concernant leur enterrement. Est-ce que vous suivez?
Oui.
Et vous regardez dans le dossier pour voir s'il y a une indication de leurs vœux.
Exact. Oui.
Bon. Et vous suivez ça si vous le trouvez.
Évident.
But obviously not in Yvette Belair's case. Had the public curator checked her file, it would have known to bury her here, at her family plot at Côte-des-Neiges Cemetery. Her file contains the original contract selling the plot to her grandfather Gendron back in the 20s. One phone call to the cemetery office would have confirmed Yvette Belair had paid the upkeep on the plot. None of this surprises Jean-Pierre Ménard, a lawyer who sued the public curator on more than one occasion. He wonders if they even bothered to open Belair's file when she died.
There is some level of negligence in that situation. I don't think it's fair, and I don't think it is in accordance with at least the spirit of the law, maybe the letter of the law.
That same law requires the public curator to represent its clients and manage their finances responsibly. Yet in Belair's file, more than $3,000 in rent is unaccounted for, presumably not collected from her tenants. As well, when Belair was summoned to appear before the rental board, the public curator didn't show up to represent her. So the case was lost by default. The public curator says it doesn't go to hearings if it knows the client has no chance of winning. Most serious of all, several documents and receipts are missing from Belair's file, even though by law they have to be there. Still, the public curator insists its files are always in order.
Nous disons que les documents sont là.
Et vous ne pouvez pas offrir une explication si par hasard les documents ne sont pas là.
Ben, ça dépend du genre de document qu'on recherche. Si on ne l'a pas eu, je peux pas l'avoir.
Je parle de tous les documents concernant la vente d'une propriété, tous les documents de la cour, des audiences, pour la vente de 2 propriétés, les reçus pour la vente d'une propriété et la commission pour cette vente.
Je serais fort surpris de voir un dossier du curateur public où il y a eu vente de propriété et que des documents que vous mentionnez soient absents.
Bon, alors regardez dans le dossier d'Yvette Belair.
Je m'excuse, je ne parle pas du dossier d'Yvette Belair et je vous ai dit que je n'en parlerai pas.
OK, alors on
Mais
parle en théorie.
mais je vous dirai que dans le dossier d'Yvette Belair, ils sont tous présents.
Alors, est-ce que ça veut dire quand Madame la Jeunesse est venue regarder
Je
le
vous
dossier,
dis, je
ils
ne-
étaient enlevés?
Absolument
dossier?
pas. Tous les documents ont été transmis. Je ne parle pas
Ouais,
du dossier.
si les documents sont pas...
Arrêtez, je vous ai dit, je ne voulais pas parler du dossier. Madame.
The missing documents and receipts may just be misfiled. Even though every file has its own number, the public curator somehow managed on several occasions to confuse Belair's file with that of another Yvette Belair. Once it even deposited money into the wrong account, then corrected the error, but forgot to credit Belair with interest.
This pattern of working is the best one to raise suspicion, doubts, question.
There are questions, too, about the psychiatric evaluation that put Yvette Belair under the public curator in the first place. In those days, all the law required was one doctor declaring her incompetent. At the time, a psychiatrist examined her for 3 hours. He concluded, the examination quickly revealed serious problems with mental functioning, incoherence, loss of concentration. He also referred to delusions she had, delusions about properties in quotation marks. But these were not delusions at all. She did own properties. Dr. Jacques Lesage is a psychiatrist and an expert on the public curator. He says doctors should verify what patients tell them so they won't make false assumptions, as was done in this evaluation.
I would say it can bring questions. I would not say that it invalidates it, but it certainly can bring questions.
Le curateur public.
Nicole La Jeunesse has been trying to get some questions answered. If the public curator has nothing to hide, it sure isn't acting that way. Getting access to her aunt's file hasn't been easy.
Oui, bonjour madame, j'aimerais savoir, pour voir le dossier d'une parente, de quelle façon qu'on s'y prend?
Au curateur public,
Oui.
c'est strictement confidentiel.
But the law says relatives do have a right to see a file at the public curator's discretion, and inheritors, like La Jeunesse, have an automatic right. The public curator can't refuse access. But that's not what they tell you when you call.
Décédé, si vous êtes une des héritières,
Oui.
sous toute réserve, vous pourrez le consulter, mais sous toute réserve.
C'est toute réserve. Vous entendez quoi de cette façon?
Ben, ça peut être refusé.
Ça peut être refusé.
Oui.
But Nicole La Jeunesse knew her rights. After mentioning she had consulted a lawyer, she was allowed to see her aunt's file, but for a fee of $70 an hour, double the usual rate, because they told her it was a complex file and 2 employees would have to serve her.
Est-ce que je peux voir le dossier d'une parente?
4 hours with the file, plus 25 cents a photocopy.
Oh, I have the receipt here. It's $479.63.
While La Jeunesse was at the public curator, back at her office, her boss, Pierre Duquette, got an unusual phone call.
Oui? He said, I am Mr. Desjardins from the public curator. He said, I wanted to notify you that if ever she told you something else, she is here at the public curator. I said, I knew that. She took that on her vacation days.
He says Desjardins probably assumed La Jeunesse had called in sick that day and was trying to get her in trouble.
Because he was mad that I insist to see the file. And when I went through the file and I said, what is the document, the court document, what is this and what is that? And they couldn't give me any answer.
It looks very, very clearly as a kind of intimidation. Clearly unacceptable, unfair, and this is absolutely inappropriate.
Pourquoi vous avez téléphoné le patron de Madame la Jeunesse pendant qu'elle était ici consultant le dossier de sa tante?
Je ne vais pas répondre là-dessus.
Est-ce que...
Non, je ne vais pas répondre là-dessus.
Pourquoi?
Je ne sais pas répondre.
Est-ce que ça, c'est une procédure normale?
Non, non, je vous dis que je n'ai pas à répondre.
Mais je pense que si on va mentionner ça dans un reportage, les gens veulent savoir pourquoi un employé de curateur public a pris des démarches comme ça. Je vous donne à...
J'ai pas à répondre.
Vous avez vos propres raisons?
J'ai mes propres raisons.
Est-ce que vous pensez que c'est quelque chose, une conduite acceptable par un employé de la curateur publique?
J'ai pas à répondre. J'ai aucune justification à donner, j'ai pas à répondre.
The public curator says it's not unusual to see relatives come out of the woodwork when someone dies. But Nicole Lajeunesse says she's not in this for the money. She stands to inherit about $3,000. While she's furious no one called her when Belair died, she admits she would have been easier to find had she gone to visit her aunt more often.
No, I didn't go as much as I should go. The lesson is not to let the old people alone without having visit. Let the people know that there's somebody in the family who cares. You never know tomorrow what could happen to you.
Lynn Herzeg, CBC News, Montreal.